The year is 1520. Off the coast of a Portuguese fort, somewhere in the forgotten wildlands of Africa, the ocean didn't just turn red, it bled. Not the subtle blush of a sunset, but a thick crimson deluge, the color of fresh slaughter, the texture of congealed nightmares. This was no ordinary tide. It was a living, malevolent entity that devoured the very wood of ships, melting hulls to splinters in hours. And the men who touched it, they didn't die. They went mad, screaming of drowned faces in the blood mist, their sanity dissolving faster than their vessels. For 3 days, the world watched the sea die. The horror did not arrive with a storm. It arrived with a whisper of rust and decay on the wind, a metallic tang that made the nostrils burn. Then the horizon shimmered, not with heat haze, but with an impossible, deepening crimson. The sea, the lifeblood of the world, was congealing. From the ramparts of the Fortaleza de São Jorge, the Portuguese garrison watched in stunned silence as the Atlantic transformed. It was not merely discolored. It was a living, breathing coagulation, a thick, viscous sludge that pulsed with an internal, malevolent light. Admiral Gaspar de Lemos, in his official report to the Crown, described it as a great river of blood boiling upon the surface, stinking of iron and the grave. The first victims were the ships. The caravel São Cristóvão, riding anchor a league offshore, was the first to succumb. Her crew, initially fascinated by the bizarre spectacle, soon watched in terror as the crimson tide lapped at her sturdy oak hull. It did not erode, it dissolved. The log of Captain Vasco de Almeida, recovered years later from a sealed cask, detailed the impossible. The wood wept into the crimson, melting like wax. Planks softened, then ran like paint. Within 2 hours, the São Cristóvão groaned, her timbers giving way, consumed by the very sea that had borne her. The ship simply collapsed, a skeletal ruin sinking into the unnatural depths. But the physical destruction was only half the nightmare. The air itself seemed to grow heavy with the tide's influence. Sailors caught in its oppressive proximity began to exhibit a terrifying madness. Men who touched the crimson substance, even briefly, were the first to shatter. Their eyes rolled back, their bodies convulsed. They clawed at their own faces, screaming of drowned figures, of spectral hands reaching from the red mist. They saw things, horrors that twisted their minds beyond recovery. They would leap overboard, not to escape, but to embrace the crimson, to join the phantom multitude they claimed to see beneath the surface. For 3 days, the crimson tide held the coast in its horrifying grip. It washed ashore, leaving behind a thick, rust-stained residue that choked the beaches and killed all marine life. The very sand seemed to weep red. When it finally receded, as mysteriously as it appeared, it left behind only the corroded skeletons of ships and miles of coastline utterly devoid of life, a scar on the very face of the earth. No survivors emerged from the tide's embrace, only the chilling accounts of those who witnessed it from the fort, forever haunted by the sea that bled. This single, impossible event, ripped from the archives, is merely the first clue in a mystery that defies logic. If you seek to understand the ocean's darkest secrets, join us. Become part of this ongoing investigation by subscribing to the Maritime Chronicler. There are depths yet unplumbed, and we're just getting started. The Chronicles of Fortaleza de São Jorge, now housed in the Arquivo Nacional da Torre do Tombo in Lisbon, offer a chillingly consistent account. The garrison, isolated and terrified, recorded not only the physical devastation, but the profound psychological impact of the Crimson Tide. Captain Diogo Fernandes, a man renowned for his stoicism, wrote of a creeping dread that seized the very soul, as if the world itself were bleeding out its life. The fort's physician, a Dr. Álvaro Mendes, noted a peculiar symptom among those who merely breathed the air near the crimson-stained coast, a persistent metallic taste in the mouth, accompanied by an irrational terror and vivid, disturbing hallucinations of drowning. This wasn't just a localized phenomenon. Whispers of similar, albeit less extreme events began to surface from other maritime archives. While never reaching the apocalyptic scale of the São Jorge incident, Accounts from the late 16th century in the Dutch East Indies speak of ochre waters that caused inexplicable illness among crews, and in 17th century Caribbean logs, there are mentions of sick seas that left ships sluggish and timbers strangely brittle. These were not the vibrant red tides caused by algal blooms we understand today. The descriptions consistently emphasized a viscosity, a weight, and a corrosive nature utterly alien to natural phenomena. One particularly disturbing log entry from the British merchant vessel Sea Serpent in 1688 sailing off the coast of West Africa details a thick, oily crimson film that coated the ocean for days. Master Robert Shaw recorded, "The very air grew heavy with the smell of iron. Our men grew feverish, their minds wandering. One lad, young Thomas, swore the sea was filled with faces, pleading and reaching. He threw himself overboard, calling out to his mother, and was never seen again." The Sea Serpent herself barely escaped, her hull requiring extensive repairs due to an inexplicable softening of the wood below the waterline. These scattered, fragmented accounts, spanning centuries and vast distances, begin to paint a disturbing pattern. They suggest that the São Jorge incident was not an isolated anomaly, but perhaps the most extreme manifestation of a recurring, yet poorly understood, maritime horror. The common threads are unmistakable: the unnatural color, the corrosive effect on wood, and most chillingly, the psychological torment inflicted upon those who encountered it. The crimson tide appears to be an entity or a force that operates beyond the known laws of oceanography and chemistry, leaving behind not just physical destruction, but a lingering stain on the human psyche. The question shifts from what happened to how it could happen, and more terrifyingly, why it continues to manifest. The scientific community, when confronted with such outlandish historical accounts, tends to seek rational explanations. The initial, most obvious candidate for a red tide is an algal bloom, a massive proliferation of microscopic organisms that can indeed color the water red. But the descriptions from São Jorge and other historical accounts defy this simple classification. Algal blooms, while sometimes toxic, do not dissolve wooden hulls in hours, nor do they induce mass psychosis and hallucinations of drowning figures. The sheer corrosive power described by Captain Vasco de Almeida, the rapid liquefaction of robust oak timbers, points to a chemical agent of unimaginable potency, far beyond anything produced by a natural biological phenomenon. Dr. Aris Thorne, a contemporary marine chemist from the Oceanic Research Institute, dismisses the algal bloom theory outright for the São Jorge event. The energy required to break down lignified cellulose at that speed without extreme heat or highly concentrated specific acids is simply not present in a typical bloom, he states in his published paper, Anomalous Marine Corrosives, a historical review. Furthermore, the accounts describe a viscosity, a thickness, inconsistent with a mere discoloration of water. This suggests a colloidal suspension, or perhaps even a non-Newtonian fluid, rather than a simple algal population. The psychological effects are equally perplexing. While some algal blooms produce neurotoxins, the specific symptoms, the metallic taste, the profound terror, and the vivid shared hallucinations of drowning, are not typical. Dr. Lena Petrova, a historical psychologist specializing in mass hysteria, offers a cautious alternative. In isolated, high-stress environments like a besieged fort or a long sea voyage, extreme environmental stimuli can trigger collective psychogenic illness. The sight of the bleeding sea combined with the real threat to their ships could have induced a shared delusion, a form of maritime folie à deux on a grand scale. Yet this explanation struggles to account for the consistent nature of the hallucinations across different crews and different centuries. Why always drowning figures? Why the specific shared terror? And it certainly doesn't explain the physical corrosion. The Crimson Tide, therefore, presents a profound paradox, a phenomenon with physical properties that defy known chemistry and psychological effects that transcend simple hysteria. It exists in the liminal space between the material and the psychological, a maritime mystery that refuses to be neatly categorized by scientific reductionism. The more we try to explain it, the deeper the questions become, suggesting an intelligence or at least an agency, behind the impossible crimson. The archives hold more than just official reports. Scattered among the dry Admiralty logs and physicians' notes are fragments of personal testimony, often dismissed as superstition, but chilling in their consistency. One such account comes from a Portuguese chaplain, Father Tomás de Lima, stationed at São Jorge in 1520. His private journal, discovered years later, speaks of a deep, resonant hum that accompanied the arrival of the crimson tide, a sound that vibrated in the very bones and stole the breath from the lungs. He described it as a song of the abyss, an almost infrasonic vibration that seemed to precede the madness. This detail, initially dismissed as the ramblings of a terrified man of God, takes on new significance when compared with later, equally obscure accounts. In 1872, the American whaling vessel Leviathan encountered a vast, crimson-stained patch of ocean off the coast of Patagonia. The logbook of First Mate Elias Vance, a man known for his sobriety and pragmatism, contains an entry that echoes Father de Lima's chilling observation. A low thrumming began, like a giant heart beating beneath the waves. It filled the air, the ship, the very marrow of our bones. Then the color came, a deep, unsettling red that pulsed with the sound. Vance noted that the crew, already unnerved by the sound, became agitated, many complaining of headaches and nausea before the first signs of the corrosive effect on the hull began. Could this hum be a key to understanding the crimson tide? Modern science recognizes the effects of infrasound, frequencies too low for human hearing, but capable of inducing physiological and psychological responses. Exposure to sustained infrasound can cause disorientation, anxiety, fear, and even hallucinations. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a bioacoustician, theorizes, if the crimson tide is somehow generating powerful, localized infrasound, it could certainly explain the initial wave of panic and the onset of hallucinations. The mind, under such duress, might project its deepest fears onto the bizarre visual stimulus of the red water, creating those shared visions of drowning. But what would generate such infrasound? And with such precision, a geological event, a deep-sea anomaly? And how would this link to the corrosive properties of the water? The puzzle deepens. The hum suggests an active, energetic process, not a passive discoloration. It implies a source, a mechanism, perhaps even an intelligence, hidden beneath the crimson veil. The sound, if truly present, transforms the crimson tide from a mere phenomenon into an event, a deliberate manifestation that assaults both the physical world and the human mind. The deep, resonant thrumming might not be a byproduct of the crimson. It might be its very voice, calling to the madness within. The mystery of the crimson tide is not confined to the surface of the sea. Ancient coastal folklore, often dismissed as mere superstition, offers a disturbing parallel. Tales from West African tribes, passed down through generations long before European contact, speak of the Blood Sea, a time when the ocean would turn thick and red, not from war or sacrifice, but from an internal wound. These legends describe not only the dissolution of canoes, but also a sickness of the mind that afflicted those who dared to sail upon it, driving them to walk into the waves and disappear. One such legend, recorded by the 19th century ethnographer Alistair Finch in his Collected African Myths and Legends, tells of the Mami Wata, a powerful water spirit, becoming enraged and causing the ocean to weep blood for the transgressions of men. The story specifies that the Blood Sea would eat the wood of the ships and steal the scents from the sailors, leaving them empty vessels. The parallels to the São Jorge accounts are chillingly precise, suggesting a shared, deep-seated cultural memory of such events. Further afield, in the Norse sagas, there are obscure references to Raudahof, or Red Sea, described not as a geographical location, but as a terrifying event where the ocean would turn to gore and ships would become soft as sponge. While often attributed to battles or sea monsters, some interpretations suggest a more primal, inexplicable phenomenon. The sagas speak of an oppressive gloom, a sense of doom settling upon the sailors, culminating in madness and acts of self-destruction. Are these merely coincidental metaphors, Or do they represent fragmented echoes of genuine, recurring encounters with the Crimson Tide? The consistency of detail, the color, the corrosive effect, the induced madness, the specific hallucinations of drowning across disparate cultures and centuries is difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. It suggests a shared experience that predates recorded history, a primal fear embedded in the collective unconscious of seafaring peoples. Dr. Anya Sharma, a cultural anthropologist, posits, folklore often serves as a mnemonic device, a way for pre-literate societies to encode dangerous environmental phenomena. If the Crimson Tide is a recurring, albeit rare, event, it would be logical for it to be integrated into oral traditions, perhaps imbued with supernatural explanations, to make the inexplicable comprehensible and to warn future generations. This perspective shifts the nature of the investigation. We are no longer just examining a physical phenomenon. We are probing a deep-seated archetype of maritime horror. The Crimson Tide, viewed through the lens of ancient wisdom, becomes more than a chemical anomaly or a mass hysteria. It becomes a primordial force, a malevolent presence woven into the very fabric of the ocean, surfacing periodically to remind humanity of the sea's indifferent and sometimes utterly alien power. The legends are not just stories. They are survival guides from a time when the world was far more mysterious and the ocean held far darker secrets. The physical evidence of the Crimson Tide, though scarce, is compelling. Beyond the historical logs, there are obscure reports of anomalies found in the wake of such events. A 19th century salvage operation off the coast of Angola, near the original São Jorge site, stumbled upon a wreck unlike any other. The schooner Esperança, lost in 1841 during a period of unnatural red fogs, was found not broken or splintered, but strangely softened. Divers reported that her oak timbers felt like wet paper, and her iron fittings were not rusted, but pitted and eaten as if by acid. Yet the surrounding seabed showed no such corrosion. This localized, targeted degradation of materials defies conventional marine decay. Further examination of the Esperança's remains, documented in a private report by the salvage company's lead engineer, Elias Croft, noted a peculiar residue clinging to the ship's remaining structure. He described it as a fine, reddish-brown powder, metallic to the touch, yet strangely organic in smell. Modern analysis of such an ancient sample would be transformative, but the Esperança's remains were eventually consumed by the sea, leaving only Croft's perplexing notes. Could this residue be the key to the Crimson Tide's destructive power? Some speculative theories suggest a highly unusual, perhaps even extraterrestrial, origin. Dr. Samuel Thorne, a theoretical astrobiologist, has put forward a radical hypothesis. Consider the possibility of extremophile microorganisms, not native to Earth, perhaps delivered by a cometary impact, or even interstellar dust. Such organisms might thrive in conditions utterly alien to our planet, producing metabolites or enzymes that act as supercorrosives. The metallic smell and the red color could indicate a high concentration of iron-reducing or iron-oxidizing bacteria, but on a scale and with an efficiency we haven't observed in terrestrial life. This alien biology theory attempts to bridge the gap between the physical and the psychological. If the Crimson Tide is indeed a massive bioengineered entity, its metabolic processes could generate both the corrosive agents and the infrasonic hum, or even airborne toxins that induce the observed madness. The drowning figures could be a collective primal fear triggered by a neurotoxin, or even a form of bioluminescent hallucination within the red medium itself. However, the lack of any confirmed intact samples of the Crimson Tide makes such theories purely speculative. Without direct analysis, we are left to piece together a picture from historical fragments and tantalizing, unverified reports. The Esperanza remains a ghost in the annals of salvage, a silent testament to a force that leaves behind not just destruction, but a trail of unanswerable questions. The Crimson Tide doesn't just sink ships, it melts them and leaves behind a residue of impossible chemistry, hinting at a life form or a technology far beyond our current comprehension. The psychological impact of the Crimson Tide extends beyond the initial madness. Accounts from survivors, those who witnessed the horror from a distance, speak of a lingering trauma, a fear of the sea itself that never truly receded. The garrison at Saint-Georges, after the 3 days of crimson horror, was reportedly plagued by nightmares for months. Soldiers described waking in cold sweats, convinced they could still smell the rust and decay, still hear the phantom screams of the sailors who vanished into the red. This profound collective PTSD, documented by Dr. Mendes in his supplementary notes, suggests something more than just witnessing a horrific event. It implies a deeper, almost spiritual violation. The men, Mendes wrote, speak not of the ships that were lost, but of the sea itself as a living, malevolent entity that sought to consume their very souls. They fear not drowning, but dissolution. This distinction is crucial. It points to a terror of annihilation, of being unmade, rather than merely perishing. The psychological scars align disturbingly with the alien biology theory. If the Crimson Tide is indeed a foreign life form, perhaps its interaction with human physiology and psychology is more profound than a simple toxin. Dr. Thorne, the astrobiologist, ventures further. Consider the possibility of a highly complex, perhaps even intelligent, non-carbon-based life form. Its metabolism or communication might involve bioelectrical impulses or pheromones that directly interfere with human brain chemistry. The drowning figures could be a projected archetypal fear or even a form of telepathic echo from the entity itself, preying on the deepest anxieties of the human mind. This raises a chilling question. Is the Crimson Tide merely a natural phenomenon, however extreme, or is it something with a malevolent will? The consistency of the hallucinations, the targeted nature of the dissolution, and the profound, lingering psychological trauma hint at an active, predatory intelligence. The sea, in these instances, is not just a force of nature, it becomes a hunter, a sentient entity that preys on both the physical and mental fabric of its victims. The true terror of the Crimson Tide, then, might not be its ability to destroy ships, but its capacity to utterly break the human spirit, to leave behind not just wreckage, but shattered minds, forever haunted by the bleeding ocean. The survivors of Saint-Georges may have escaped the physical embrace of the Crimson, but they carried its indelible mark within them, a chilling testament to a horror that transcends the physical and invades the very sanctuary of the mind. The sheer scale of the Saint-Georges incident and the less severe but equally perplexing subsequent encounters raises a critical question. What would be the environmental impact of such an event? The historical accounts paint a grim picture. Miles of coastline utterly devoid of life. The very sand seemed to weep red. This level of devastation points to an ecological catastrophe far beyond what a typical algal bloom or even a localized chemical spill could achieve. Official reports from the Portuguese crown, dispatched to assess the aftermath at Saint-Georges, confirmed the desolation. A survey team, sent weeks after the tide receded, reported that fishing grounds were barren, the local fauna had vanished, and even the coastal vegetation had withered and died. The ground itself, where the crimson sludge had washed ashore, was described as scorched and lifeless, as if a corrosive fire had swept through. This wasn't merely a temporary disruption, it was a profound, long-lasting ecological wound. Dr. Elena Rossi, an environmental toxicologist, reviews the historical data with a grim expression. If we take these accounts at face value, she postulates, we're looking at something that fundamentally alters the ecosystem, not just temporarily, but with a persistent, destructive legacy. The descriptions of eaten land and lifeless waters suggest a substance that isn't just toxic, but perhaps fundamentally alters soil pH, introduces heavy metals, or leaves behind a bioaccumulative poison. It's a localized extinction event. This long-term environmental degradation further strengthens the argument against conventional explanations. An algal bloom, even a highly toxic one, typically disperses or dies off, allowing the ecosystem to recover over time. The Crimson Tide leaves a permanent scar, suggesting a non-biodegradable or self-replicating contaminant. If the alien biology theory holds, then these are not just the remnants of a destructive process, but perhaps the lingering waste products of an extraterrestrial organism, or even its dormant spores, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. The implications are terrifying. If the Crimson Tide is indeed a recurring, planet-altering event, its infrequency is our only salvation. But what triggers its appearance? And what if, in our increasingly interconnected world, a future manifestation were to occur in a more populated or ecologically sensitive region? The historical record is a stark warning. The Crimson Tide doesn't just pass. It leaves behind a blighted landscape, a testament to a power that can fundamentally unmake the natural world, turning vibrant life into a barren, crimson-stained graveyard. The environmental aftermath is not merely a consequence. It is a profound, lingering signature of an anomaly that operates on a scale far beyond human understanding. The pattern of the Crimson Tide's appearance is as elusive as its nature. The São Jorge incident in 1520, the sea serpent encounter in 1688, the Esperanza's demise in 1841, and other scattered mentions throughout maritime history share little in terms of geographical consistency. They appear off the coast of Africa, in the Caribbean, near Patagonia, seemingly random points across the globe. This lack of a clear geographical nexus complicates any attempt to link the phenomenon to specific geological features or deep-sea vents. However, a closer look reveals a subtle, unnerving temporal pattern. While centuries may pass between major documented incidents, the periods of increased activity often coincide with other significant global events. The São Jorge event occurred during a period of intense global exploration and naval expansion. The Sea Serpent and Esperanza incidents fall within eras of heightened industrialization and increasing maritime traffic. This correlation, while purely observational, raises a disturbing question. Is the Crimson Tide somehow triggered by human activity? Dr. Alistair Finch, the ethnographer who documented the Mami Wata legends, noted a recurring theme in African folklore. The blood sea often appeared when humanity transgressed against the natural order, particularly when the sea was exploited or disrespected. The legends speak of the ocean's anger, Finch wrote, a response to the desecration of its bounty or the spilling of innocent blood upon its surface. This aligns with the periods of intense whaling, slave trade, or colonial exploitation that characterized the eras of the Crimson Tide's recorded appearances. Could the Crimson Tide be a reactive phenomenon, a planetary defense mechanism, or even a form of biological immune response to human impact on the oceans? This radical hypothesis, though lacking direct scientific proof, offers a compelling narrative. If the alien biology theory is correct, perhaps this complex organism remains dormant for long periods, only activating when specific environmental or energetic thresholds are crossed. Thresholds often linked to human industrial or military activity. Consider the sheer volume of maritime traffic, the increasing pollution, the sonar pulses, and the deep-sea explorations of recent centuries. Each of these represents a novel disturbance to the ocean's delicate balance. If the Crimson Tide is a sentient or semi-sentient entity, these disturbances could be perceived as threats, prompting its defensive, destructive manifestations. The thought is chilling. The Crimson Tide is not a random act of nature, but a deliberate, albeit inscrutable response. It appears not by chance, but by provocation, a warning, or perhaps a punishment from the deep. This shifts the narrative from a passive mystery to an active, potentially hostile interaction. The question then becomes not just what the Crimson Tide is, but what it perceives us to be, and what future transgressions might awaken it once more. The vast, indifferent ocean might not be as indifferent as we believe. In the modern age, with satellites mapping every ripple and sonar probing every trench, the idea of a truly unexplainable maritime phenomenon seems archaic. Yet the Crimson Tide persists as a chilling outlier, a ghost in the data. Its very nature, rare, unpredictable, and utterly destructive, makes direct scientific investigation impossible. To encounter the Crimson Tide is not to study it, it is to be consumed by it. No samples have ever been recovered. No survivors have emerged with coherent testimony, only the echoes of madness and the silence of dissolution. Professor Dr. Anya Sharma, revisiting her earlier theories, now emphasizes this critical investigative void. We cannot collect data from something that obliterates its own evidence. She states in a recent lecture, every reported incident ends with the complete destruction of the vessel and the psychological shattering of witnesses. It's a self-erasing mystery. This forces us to rely solely on historical accounts and theoretical models, a deeply frustrating reality for any scientific endeavor. This inherent unknowability is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Crimson Tide. If it is an alien biology, as Dr. Thorne suggests, then it operates on principles entirely outside our understanding of life, chemistry, and physics. Its dormancy, if indeed it is dormant, poses an even greater threat. What if the conditions that trigger its appearance are becoming more frequent in our warming, polluted, and increasingly traversed oceans? What if our continuous probing of the deep, our sonic mapping and drilling, are perceived as the very transgressions ancient folklore warned against? The ocean, in its vastness, holds secrets that mock our technological hubris. We may chart its currents, map its floor, and understand its basic chemistry, but the Crimson Tide serves as a stark reminder that there are forces, perhaps entities, that defy all our classifications. It is a primordial terror, a malevolent presence that surfaces from the abyss not to be understood but to unmake. Its rarity offers a fragile comfort, but the historical accounts are a chilling promise. The sea that bled once can bleed again, and when it does, it will not offer clues. It will only offer oblivion. The Crimson Tide, a sea that bleeds, a substance that devours wood and sanity, a phenomenon that defies our deepest scientific understanding, leaving behind only corroded wreckage and shattered minds. Is it a hypertoxic algal bloom pushed to an impossible extreme by forgotten conditions? Is it a rare geological efflux of corrosive compounds interacting with the ocean in a way we cannot replicate? Or is it something far more profound, far more unsettling? Perhaps the true horror lies not in its physical nature, but in its psychological resonance. The consistent hallucinations of drowning figures, the pervasive sense of dread, the lingering trauma. Could these be echoes of a collective primal fear triggered by an entity that taps into the deepest anxieties of the human psyche? Or is it, as the more radical theories suggest, a manifestation of an alien intelligence, a planetary defense mechanism, or even a dormant predatory life form awakened by our ceaseless probing of the deep? The ocean is a vast, ancient library of secrets, and sometimes the books it opens are not meant for human eyes. The Crimson Tide remains unclassified, an anomaly that refuses to be tamed by our science or confined by our logic. It is a terrifying reminder that beneath the familiar waves, there are still depths of mystery that guard horrors beyond our wildest imagination. What do you believe the Crimson Tide truly is? A biological anomaly, a geological marvel, or something far more sinister, a living, breathing entity of the abyss? Share your theories in the comments below. Let's unravel this mystery together.